Anyone who's lived in the video game industry is used to being asked, what's your favourite game? And more often than not, the answer they respond with is different than what they gave to the last person who asked about 3 seconds ago. That's because it's entirely down to your mood, and you'll be hard pressed to pin it down to one specific thing. Unless, of course, you've been involved in the industry for 18 plus years like me. Then you kind of realise there are a few particular titles you'll never be able to look away from, and despite some of its age and bumps, you'll still enjoy it like it's your first time round all over again. So here's my best effort at doing that. It's a top 10 though, because narrowing it down to 1 while ignoring all the rest that have become one with my soul, stronger than my future wife would probably appreciate, would only hurt me in the long run. In the same way it will probably hurt my future wife's ears when I still won't shut up about them aged 60. So let's begin, shall we? Number 10. Godhand. I suppose I should start with a disclaimer that I was born in the very tail end of the 90s, so outside of the Sega Mega Drive that was around in my faintest and earliest memories, my love for video games well and truly found its footing with the PlayStation 2. Capcom especially always knew how to absorb my attention with their unique and hilarious stories that happened to be smacked onto bafflingly deep combat systems, more on that later. So the child me got the fun of the jokes, while the slightly older child me got the hook of trying to learn the ins and outs of every single little thing I could do in it. Thus enters Godhand. Godhand is an over-the-shoulder action game that, unlike Dad of War, was actually fun and well built around the camera angle it gave itself, whilst also being one of the hardest games you were ever likely to play at a time before hardest game ever started to lose its meaning in the 2010s. The game leans into its humour heavily, with some being what I could easily understand at the time of first exposure, while the rest dawned me as a teenager with about as much subtlety as, well, a teenager's first experience to a sex joke, I suppose. But then you start playing, get beat up several times, but still end up learning a thing or two along the way. You want to see what some of these little things you've learned can do, so you start experimenting, trying out different things. But then you realise attack A links into attack C better than it does B, and just like that, they've got you, ladies and gentlemen. Now you're chasing every single new skill you can find, slapping them on yourself like Seto Kaiba slaps a blue-eyed white dragon onto his jewel disc, just to realise Yugi's got the heart of the card, so will win anyway unless you do something drastic like threaten to jump off a castle wall. Yes, that actually happened in the show, but replace Yugi with just about every boss in the game and you get the gist. Yet it's so evilly addictive. Even once you've mastered it and got every single command set to exactly what you want to string the best, most badass combo you've ever seen, you still got to accept that not one enemy is going to take it lying down, and if it's a bad day, they'll transform into a demon and really start rocking your world. Yet because of this, overcoming it feels infinitely more rewarding, as you did everything to plot and execute your victory. Godhand is how brutal challenges should work in anything. It's not just about kicking you about, it's kicking you about so you learn something. Number 9. Deep Labyrinth. It's going to be hard to talk about Deep Labyrinth without coming across as some kind of shining knight that will defend it to my grave, but this is my list, so deal with it. That being said, most of its flaws can be summarised as, wow, they really tried to do X ambitious thing on the Nintendo DS, didn't they? I bet it would have been much smoother on a console. It's a grid-based first-person action-adventure game where everything but movement is done by the touchscreen, even though you absolutely know they could have mapped everything to buttons, but such is the curse of being an early title for a Nintendo console. You become the test subject. You swing your sword by touching the touchscreen, cast spells, raise the world's most useless shield, and use items for it too. But its charm from this is that it works everything in a way that you rarely ever have to pause unless you forget how to cast a spell or something. So you'll be fighting a boss that's throwing everything at you while you're mid-running in circles trying to avoid it, while panic casting a spell you have to memorise yourself to heal a little off, or to make yourself resistant to being shot 20 odd times. Its level design is both fun and complicated, with secrets scattered everywhere, and a little trick it does a few times where if you pick up a plot important key but then find a way to get around the door it opens without using it, you can use it instead in the end game to unlock the best equipment in the game. So you thinking you've just outsmarted the game actually gets a real reward and not just an egotistical one. The game also has an RPG mechanics in it, but it's only stat leveling, which makes me wonder if what it could have been if it was a handheld title. I know I'm criticising it a fair bit despite placing it higher than Godhand, but I tend to criticise the games I love the most far more than the rest because I love it so much. I want it to be the best it could be. God help me if I ever fall in love with someone. But probably the biggest reason why I love it so much is how unapologetically honest the game is. It knows its faults and rides with it while being really fun in its own way. Heck, it even has 2 stories, with the latter of the 2 being harder, while also having less of a story, so you get an option to go for an old school role-playing or a newer-ish role-playing experience. I say newer-ish, but this game did come out too many years ago for me to dare look up in case my back breaks upon realizing I'm old. Number 8! Bloodborne. Hey, it's a game that anyone and everyone watching this knows about. I guess I'll keep this short then. FromSoft's level design, world building, storytelling and gameplay is very much something you're either all in for or showing the door every time it pops up in the hundreds of games that drew inspiration from it, that it shivers from fear of a lawsuit the moment you bring it up. But I never got Dark Souls when it came out, and by the time I did, I found it to be one of those perfectly fine 7 out of 10 games. You know the ones. You enjoyed it, you're glad you finished it, but now I only ever collect dust, even though you swear you'll play it again one day. Someday. Maybe. But Bloodborne was different, despite not really being different other than having a Lovecraftian setting and faster gameplay. Where Dark Souls is slower and more defensive based, Bloodborne warns you right out the gate it's kill or be killed. Yet somehow it was enough to make me understand why so many people gravitate to anything from software develop, because I proceeded to play through the game 10 times straight with the same sadistic smile on my face I had the first time, finding tiny drips of lore I missed the other runs that probably fed my decaying brain, trying different weapons to see I could achieve my builds, and memorizing the world better than my own hometown. And then there's... no, wait, I said I'd keep this brief because you all know this. Bloodborne good because kill. Number 7, Tales of Berseria. Although the Tales of series has always had a strong cult following, Berseria is still quite heavily overlooked, mostly because it immediately follows and references Zestiria, which really wasn't that good of a game, in the same way everyone ignored Final Fantasy 13-2 after 13-1 did what it did and was sentenced to the naughty corner. But like 13-2, I've always been upset by this because Tales of Berseria is the first title on this list I'd proudly list as legendary. Tales of Berseria is an action wait, anything on this list so far has been an action game of some kind. Well, if it helps, this game leans a lot harder into the RPG side of things than the other games on here so far, with each fight being transitioned into after touching toes in the field first and having weapons, armor and accessories that have various uses, and can be upgraded and altered to your playstyle alongside your entire move list while you're at it, while also giving your team flashy special attacks and a full team of 6 you can control at once, even if only 4 can share the screen space at one time. You may have noticed by now, but the more freedom to do what I want with the actual gameplay a game has, the more I like it, even if it has problems elsewhere. Berseria's elsewhere problem would probably be the game is far too long for its own good, and has any right to be, really. But yet Velvet just ripped a dude's head off before shoulder checking his still standing corpse into a wall that shattered immediately, so now I don't care. Plus, it's one of those stories where you play as a pretty blatant bad guy, and the game kind of runs with it. Like, this holy man is about to save the world, but Velvet's brother was a sacrifice for it, so that holy man is going to die today, or so help me. That being said, unlike the previous titles on this list, I bring up the protagonist here because Velvet is genuinely a fascinating character who has her beliefs and morals challenged without pause for most of the adventure, causing her to develop from a murderous monster to, well, a proud murderous monster. I'm undercutting how impactful her story really is here, but I could go on for an eternity on why Velvet is a fantastically written character that's also surrounded by a great supporting cast, and despite the dark premise, still knows when to kick back and laugh like Super Moody Eisen in his determination to build the most pointless secret tunnels you could ever imagine. But the point of this isn't to just say I love this game, it's also to say that it's criminally underrated. Not helped by Bandai Namco's baffling decision to block any ability to record game footage of the PlayStation 4's built-in recording software, meaning any chance most of us who can't afford capture cards, decent PCs, and or editing programs can't, be the free advertising most of us end up becoming when you're on YouTube. Please, Bandai, it's not too late, patch out the recording block and all will be forgiven. Number 6, Final Fantasy IV. This one's a weird one, because if I was in a room with other Final Fantasy fanatics, I'd tell them 7 is the best one, followed by 5 and 9 for different reasons. Yet as soon as I'm with anyone else, I respond shouting 4! Well, like a nervous twitch. Ultimately, FF4, which is what I'll be calling it from now on, is the game that started my love affair with the franchise as a whole, so my super biased list of games I love gets an extra gear added to it labelled childhood bias as well. FF4 isn't an action game though, so for a change it's a turn-based JRPG instead. And yes, I know, I can hear you already. Really jumping leaps and bounds here, Rob. Next you're going to tell us there's a platform on this list somewhere as well, aren't you? Wait, why are you hesitating? FF4 is the game where you murder a whole village because a clearly evil empire you're loyal to demanded it, and it's enough for Cecil hadn't questioned anything up until this point, Harvey, to finally question why he did that as the lone survivor as a little girl who couldn't possibly understand or process why you just murdered everyone she loved, and yet 20 minutes later, somehow this kid just becomes your best friend, which is exactly as questionable as it sounds, but who do I care, she can later summon a goddamn dragon. Cecil then goes on the quest with a crew consisting of, brace yourself, his future wife, his definitely not a traitor best friend, some ninja, a creepy dwarf, a spoony bard, their words not mine, a monk, more kids because Cecil wasn't made to be creepy enough, and some sage with glasses that definitely don't fit the fantasy setting at all. He later finds Jesus while chilling atop a mountain that also resets him to level 1, so thanks Jesus, and makes him a paladin back when it was still a cool D&D class. After a casual visit to the moon, you take down a giant robot, fight your brother, and then later God to save the day. Sounds simple enough, right? Well, yeah, it is. It was FF6 that started really going all in on its plot, but its simplicity is part of its charm, I find. You can beat it over the weekend while still feeling pretty satisfied. Plus, if you really want more, the PlayStation Portable version added extra dungeons and remade the sprites to look gorgeous. So what more do you want, really? Play it. Oh, wait. Right, gameplay. Unlike the other FF games, you have a party of 5 that's pretty much picked out for you for the entire adventure, unless of course you are playing that PSP version. They all have different unique techniques that make them stand out and effective in their own way, unless your name is Edge the Ninja. Cecil starts out with a Dark Knight who hits hard even if he hits himself in the process, before finding the previously mentioned Jesus after fighting a shadow of himself to become a paladin who will tank the damage for everyone else if you let him. Makes me think Cecil just likes pain, but he's got enough slightly creepy points after the whole children joining his team thing anyway, so I'll let it slide. FF4 was also the game to introduce Meteor as the new strongest spell in the game, except no it isn't, because Flare is a single target super murder and Bahama is just Flare if it could actually hit everyone without the damage cut that usually comes from group attacks, so it becomes Ultra Murder. Added with the amazing music, FF4 is just a gem that always deserves more love. Number 5, Mega Dimension Neptunia V2R. Anytime I bring up Neptunia, I'm always met with, isn't this game just basically soft porn? And I have to respond with the most suspicious, no, you're likely to ever hear from me. But it wouldn't be on this list for boobs alone, or this list would be radically different, and I'll tell you that now. Firstly, the franchise as a whole has had this misconception for way too long. The first game has a few moments you wouldn't want your parents to walk into if you catch my drift, but after that, they tone it back quite a lot and let it genuinely hilarious writing step in and do its job. It should instead be known as the anime game that knows how to actually deliver mature and immature jokes without seeming childish for the most part, while also starring a protagonist that becomes more relatable the more you learn about her, and a unique turn-based gameplay loop that they admittedly dropped from this specific version I played. What I mean is, Neptunia V2R here is essentially a director's cut version of V2, the fourth mainline game in the series that has extra story beats, VR support, new music, but a completely different gameplay system from the rest of the franchise, including the game it's a director's cut of, attempting to make it seem more action focused instead. But I love both styles and harped on religiously on why I loved it in the reviews I did forever ago on this series. But the reason why this ended up on this list is because it never stops making me laugh. It never stops revealing more in its hand of extra content and never stops just being a blast with references to the gaming industry at large that feels real and not the haha old games are weird kind of references most games have nowadays. It is, though, one of those games that desperately needs a sequel in my opinion. A fifth mainline game that cleaned up some of the gaps and made the story a bit longer could make it my all-time favourite game, and I'm really not kidding when I say that. It's just got a few little things holding it back from being that 10 out of 10 game it should be, even though I would still class this as a legendary title. Like the splunking minigame and how it barely works, or how the devs behind this game are just more interested in remastering the first game a third time instead of actually making a new game. But I digress. I do want to make a correction to my old reviews though. Throughout all of them I swore that Vert was the best character in the game, but I've since come around to accepting Blanc as the real best girl. Mostly because Idea Factory hasn't known what to do with Vert since the first game other than making her boobs the centre of the camera. I mean, no, this game isn't about boobs, mum, I swear. Number 4, Persona 4/Persona 4 Golden. Talking of games I've spoken at length on before, we're now at Persona 4, the game that my PS2 says I hit 999 hours, 59 minutes on, but I hit that many years ago. Without meaning to just send you to that video I did again, allow me to shrink down and summarise why. Unlike Persona 3, you control your whole party, which immediately eliminates the real thing that killed you in Persona 3, the luck. Expanded on its social systems, so it's not only fun with every character, but has benefits to gameplay that aren't just cutting down on grinding. Gave what I still feel is the best cast in the series, even if my love for Futaba from Persona 5 has been known publicly for years, and has its turn-based gameplay fine-tuned to a T by that point, and it did everything with enough care and consideration that anyone could get into it, while having the options to make it as difficult or as easy as yourself as you want it. Plus, if it is way too hard for you even with the options, Golden exists, which has even easier as a whole and offers far more options to alter the difficulty to your choosing, so there's really no excuse here. You want it easy? Make it so. You want it hard? It can be like a rock. The story is really charming too, in a Scooby-Doo kind of way, but with a bit more murder and a darker subtext. Plus it deals with themes of identity a lot, and as someone who's always been an oddball when compared to anyone I know, it's the sort of thing you learn to appreciate. Plus it's got a villain that unironically says bitches and whore one time in some manga, and that's pretty charming. It's sometimes a little stupid. Like FF4 though, it's worth mentioning its soundtrack, but saying an Atlas game has good music is like saying rainbows exist. It's not newly enlightening information, you know. But P4 in particular I feel gets ignored with its music more than P3 and P5. The latter I can understand as the series went mainstream with that one, so more people know about it and it's not easy to just go back for some people, but Persona 3 always felt like some people just don't want to accept it's aged worse than Persona 2 thanks to dumb gameplay decisions that were only mended in a PSP port handled by a third party, and a social system that really wanted you to hang out with a dude trying to con you and a kid who was just using you to boost his own ego just so you could cut down on a little grinding. But yet again, I digress. Persona 4 and its director's cut, Golden, work wonders in getting just about anyone that is on the fence about JRPGs into it. It's a little slow once it gets going, but once it does, you're set for life. Number 3, Metal Gear Solid 3 Snake Eater. Oh Kojima, I too remember a time when you actually had fun gameplay alongside your interesting stories before MGS5 and Death Stranding showed us you really stopped caring for either because subtext is all you want to hear and celebrity cast is all you want to know. But Metal Gear Solid 3 was a different time, and sometimes I suspect a different universe to where we're at now, because it's the only game I've ever played to try and be realistic with its gameplay and it actually help it instead of weighing it down. The more you play, rest, eat and progress, the more Snake, your main character, develops in the gameplay. If you race through the game, you don't notice it, but take a week off, Snake's health sure has grown from all that sleep he had. The survival aspects are the right balance of testing while not bogging down the details. You take a big fall, expect a fracture, but don't eat for a week? Well, just one bite of some licensed food will fix that, or if not, come back tomorrow and Snake will sleep off to starvation. In all seriousness, MGS3 is the most thought-provoking game without going over the top like anything that 2 and 4 does. Its plot is self-contained, or at least it was until Portable, Peace Walker and 5 came along and muddled everything. It has a symbolic and beautiful ending with a harsh message that can and will make you cry if you think too much on it, and is extremely cheeky at all times. Snake grinning at the idea of shooting a beehive down to the misfortune of some guard sticks with you, you know? It still has some of the Kojima weirdness, but it pulls it off with just enough that it gets away with it this time. Number 2, SpongeBob SquarePants Battle for Bikini Bottom. Yes, SpongeBob is on here. Yes, I do enjoy it more than Bloodborne, any Final Fantasy or Persona. Yes, I do think it's the second best game I've ever played in my life. And no, I'm not referring to the rushed remake that came out last year. I'm talking about the 2003 original, baby! With its smooth as silk controls, great sense of humour and perfect length to casually enjoy or competitively enjoy, what more could you want? I couldn't help but notice an eyebrow raise when I said competitively, so I guess I'll have to explain. The game is an amazingly speedrun friendly game, with hundreds of tricks from easy to hard to learn, allowing races to stand out from one another as most people have their own paths on what to do and where to go to reach the end. The premise is simple too. It's a collectathon platformer with 100 trinkets up for grabs. You only need 75 of them to reach the end, and you're mostly free to go about the ones you want in any order you desire. I say mostly because until you start speedrunning, you'll technically be blocked off by several areas until you reach smaller thresholds such as needing 15 to get the first gate in the hub world open and net yourself the bubble bowl attack. You can't get around the requirement for the attack, but you absolutely can get around the gate before you have 15 to access other levels. The levels are creative too, while still being limited by the show. What I mean is that you still go to Kelp Forest, but you go through a cave system and do a hazardous slide challenge too. My favourite level will always be SpongeBob's Dream though, mostly for Sandy's part of it and many different ways you can approach it. The game is just wonderful, but I must admit I've played through it so many times since I was around 4 or 5 years old that any problems I did have with the game have long since been burned by acceptance. So if you're expecting me to offer criticism here, you're only ever going to get me complaining that it never got a direct sequel. No, the movie game doesn't count. It's barely bigger than what would have been an expansion while being way more linear. And number 1, Devil May Cry 3. And now we bring it all back around. A badass, fun, cheeky action game with an insane depth in mechanics, brilliant sense of humour, and a surprisingly heartfelt ending that sticks with you long after you played it. I should note that Devil May Cry 3 holds 2 merits for me. It's not just my favourite video game ever, it's also my favourite final boss in a game ever. Sephiroth from Final Fantasy VII Remake almost dethroned Virgil from Best Final Boss, but the raw 1v1 showdown against Virgil presented at the end of the game is the true stuff of legends. I don't even have a joke for this bit, it's just that damn good. The gameplay straight up allows you to change entire movesets, something that found its true potential in the sequels, but started here. With 6 styles to choose from, bolstered by 5 weapons and 5 guns to choose from, and you can swap out between 2 at any time. Huge variety of enemies and bosses that will test you in unique and creative ways, and loads of things like costumes to unlock post-game. The game will just keep you occupied for a lifetime, and it certainly did when I was a kid. Especially when Capcom released Special Edition and gave birth to Virgil's ever so tragic fate of never being playable in the game until the Special Edition comes out. Poor guy. But Devil May Cry 3 is more than just a phenomenal action game with amazing combat, exciting boss fights and dramatic moments. It also redefined action games into its own subgenre, showing that 3D action games could absolutely be as fluid and as technical as the 2D games before it. It had mastered the formula to an art and has become a central source of influence for many action titles since. This has to mean something for a title that came out 15 odd years ago. I'm not just some old man clinging to the past here, the game still powers on to this day. I will give credit where it's due to Devil May Cry 4. For not being a finished game at all, Dante's gameplay took 3's idea and ran with it to make it the best it could possibly be, and although 5 missed a couple of the much deeper systems and mechanics that 4 had, it still delivered amazing combat, both of which have 3 to thank for walking so they could run. And there you have it. I wanted to keep this video short-ish and have it be more focused on my main emotions on each title and not just go into the nitty-gritty details of every single little thing. Of course, this list always has the potential to change and new games are always coming out, but as it stands, these games will always be my top picks. The list of honourable mentions, though, is gigantic. It took me a very long time to narrow down all of them to just this list, so I'll quickly list off this list now. Yakuza 0, Death End Request 2, Final Fantasy 7 and its remake, Persona 5, haven't played Royal yet, Dragon Star Varnir, Kingdom Hearts 2 Final Mix, Shin Megami Tensei 3 Nocturne, Bravely Default, Devil May Cry 4 Special Edition, Doom 2016, Halo Reach, Red Dead Redemption, Silent Hill 2, The Evil Within 2, BlazBlue Central Fiction, Persona 4 Arena Ultimax, Sonic Adventure, Genshin Impact, Trials Evolution, The Simpsons Hit and Run, Tomb Raider Anniversary, this game's probably 11th, Hitman Blood Money, Professor Layton and the Lost Future, Unwound Future in the US, Sonic the Hedgehog 3, Pokemon Platinum, Pokemon Mystery Dungeons Explorers of the Sky, Burnout Revenge, and finally, Futurama PlayStation 2. And that's it. I just wanted to do a special little video talking back on everything I love about each game I grew up with, basically. I know it's predominantly dominated by the PlayStation 2 era, but what can I say? It's what I grew up with. Everyone's like that. What you grew up with tends to give you those rose-tinted spectacles that just allow you to overlook some of its problems and make you love them for what they are anyway. But even then, there are a few of them that, despite my love for them, do have problems. Like, I'm not going to pretend Devil May Cry 3 doesn't have problems, where you go through the whole third act of the game and it's just a retread of the first act of the game but rearranged. I'm not going to ignore SpongeBob's development cuts and how SpongeBob's Dream level has an entire chunk of it that's just missing and the game just gives you the spatula when you get there. There are things that I can criticise from the games I love because I always want to see them grow further. But I hope you enjoyed this different little thing that I have done, especially as it buys the time as I wait for a PlayStation 5 to try and get one so I can get back to doing longer Let's Plays again, but what can you do? Anyway, thank you so much for watching as always. I love you all. Take care now. Bye.